everybody. Welcome to this special episode of Hammers and Dice. It's just Reed and I were the only ones who were able to hop on as quickly after the reveal that happened today. But we just kind of wanted to get our initial thoughts out there and hot damn. I feel like there is a lot to process here.
Yeah, I mean, like, and it's like there's so much to go through as far as just like emotions of like, first off, just seeing a cinematic like this, it's like it's really an amazing treat, and just parsing through that alone has been what I've been going through just in the last 20 odd minutes since it ended, let alone all the models and the changes that are coming.
Yeah, I mean, getting to see Valdor and Malcador talking together in a cinematic trailer.
Right.
I mean,
And
I'm
Genevieve
kind of,
Kroll, like that was cool
yeah,
seeing her as well. I love seeing the kind of big three that are around the Emperor who, are kind of held back almost from being a part of the narrative purview because they know so much and yet they're so bound to be around the Emperor.
yeah. And like I was expecting some sort of trailer, but like that was really cool.
Yeah. I
And
think the only thing that could have like sweetened it for me is like I really love that they showed Horus in the first one. It would have been cool to see a little bit more of Isstvan 5 in the way of maybe showing like some kind of cinematic of just like the legions clashing. Um, and along with that, potentially seeing Vulcan. Because like I'll say as a Salamander player, I feel like I was eating a lot during this drop.
yeah,
And not to spoil too much about our release schedule coming up, but so Randy and I have been planning on doing when it was kind of rumored that it was going to be set on Isstvan 5 and confirmed, obviously, with the kind of lead up to the third edition announcement. We're planning on doing an Isstvan 5 little lore recap because, like, it hasn't been done as much by people because it's kind of this very told story already, and I wanted to kind of relook at it now as GW seems to be going back to it, also to see what changes. But I was really curious and trying to find images of actually the betrayal, like of the massacre of the Salamanders and the Iron Warriors, because there's battle scenes that Games Workshop has released for the massacre, and then there's the everyone is dead shots. But there's kind of no ones of like the Iron Warriors gunning down the Salamander. So like it was really amazing seeing that kind of uh um kind of finding that part that's never been shown but that we know of, and how the Iron Warriors were able to kind of pop up out of nowhere to even continue the ambush.
yeah. No, that was really cool. And
Yeah.
seeing the tarantula gun, or how do they pronounce it? What's the name of it
We'll
now?
get to it. It's the upgraded version though. It's like the older brother version they
Yeah,
called
it's
it.
not called the tarantula anymore. I guess there's still the tarantula, but this is the arachne. So
Mm-hmm.
still going with an arachnid scheme for the naming. I'm very excited to see the rules for that platform now. Like if it's actually gonna be any good, or if it's just gonna be a terrain piece, like we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about the other day. Um,
Well, no, so like imagine this though. So like, and especially like I'm always considering how this is going to turn into LVO as well in a lot of ways, and how it's going to affect campaigns and rules going forward. Imagine if we do kind of get these kind of more objective marker kind of interactive game parts that your side is on the back foot right now, and you're allocated some campaign resources, and now everyone can pay this campaign resource to bring one of the Arachnus field guns with them. And just like the idea of like how that, if that stuff becomes more mainstream, and especially with like the tokens that come in the box, this could really revitalize the game in a lot of ways.
yeah. So let's talk about the box. So uh, with the high res images, was there anything that now that you saw it, like actual nice pictures, is there anything that you noticed that you didn't see from like the grainy picture we got earlier this week?
I think the biggest one was the console for the Iron Warriors, the one that's painted in the Iron Warriors color. Obviously, it's Legion, non-specific.
Yeah.
Um, I will say what's interesting is the consistent patterning for these new Praetors and consoles of these like chest sigils that are kind of looming down, and they're the things that are like holding the cape
Yeah, it's
to
the
the
same one that
pauldrons.
they had for the generic Praetor
Yep.
in the
I was interested in seeing that and seeing how that kind of continuity of design continued. I really enjoyed that because that was probably one of the blurriest models that we couldn't see in the
Yeah.
leaked images. Um, the gun, sure, cool. It has the accelerator autocannons, double of them from the Sakaran. You know, that's going to be an interesting thing, and I'm interested to see. Like, it seems like they're really leaning into this maybe drop pod. You know, what if their plan is, hey, here's a 15-point tarantula model or something like that, and you can deploy it, and then all of a sudden it might soak up the Overwatch that you're kind of fearing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there it could be revitalizing the game that way. It definitely seems that the Terminators are going to be able to deep strike. I'm kind of I haven't read anything yet that confirms that, but they definitely showed them doing that in the trailer, which I wanted to talk about a little bit more about the trailer and what we saw in there because um, you know, they're always really good in these where they only show what's actually coming. So, you know, they were using stuff obviously from the box, direct models that they probably just imported into, you know, kind of animating them. Um, but also from there, we saw a glaive in the background along with the fell blade. We definitely saw the quad batteries that are illuminated at one point by the battle happening in the background. But we see that the Terminators deep strike in. So I think that there is a good argument to be made that and potentially even a Saturnine dreadnought can deep strike.
Yeah. Well, in the article it says that those little circular, I don't even know what
Called
to call them, the
okay,
little things in the pauldrons for the second
yeah.
thing are deep strike. That's what they're for. They're for deep striking
Oh
capability.
hell yes, I hadn't even read
Um,
that yet. That's awesome to hear. Well, like that.
and then
Look, confirmed.
yeah, and then I also
Um,
read something about the tarantulas. I think they will be able to drop in. I don't know if they're gonna call it deep strike or call it something else because it seems like they're introducing a lot of new things into the system, which we'll get into a little bit more. But it says that they are able to drop into the field.
yeah. But
So
what about you, Randy? Did you have anything that you saw in this box that you know
yeah,
from the
so
preview that hyped you?
similarly to you, I was interested in the Iron Wars Praetor. I mean, we kind of saw that he had a little cybermillier thing with him before, but now that we have a good glance of it, that's and it even says he's accompanied by a cyberfamiliar in the article, which
Mhm.
means that they're no longer locked to certain legions anymore. That like
Yeah,
Praetors and potentially Centurions from any legion can now upgrade themselves with a cyberfamiliar. Uh,
which is really interesting. And it, you know, are they going to continue doing the same,
yeah, if
you
it's
know,
just like a plus
role?
one to your invul and save, or if it gives you
What if
some
it's just a
other,
+1 to wound? Because in the trailer, we saw it take the shot from the disintegrator weapon and just disintegrate.
yeah,
So I like that idea of maybe doing that because if it goes from non-legion specific, then it means that like salamanders can take it. And with their, you know, 3-up invulnerable they already have from the shield, you know, once again, this is in theory if everything continues as is. They'd get a 2-up invulnerable save, which most rules will obviously say that you can't obviously get. But it just, I don't know if I see that happening.
yeah. And then the other thing was getting a closer look at the Mark II. It's very interesting because I mean Mark II has always looked very similar to Mark III, so it's interesting kind of comparing the two and where the differences are.
Mm-hmm.
I do really like the look of them, especially like the chunky legs that they have. Uh,
Right.
the one thing that I was a little like sad we didn't see is that because it had meant we saw that it said they were going to be veteran legionaries, and I was hoping we might get some upgrades that spruce up the regular Mark IIs to make them into veterans, but it looks like you literally
Mm-hmm.
just make them veterans by giving them the disintegrators.
Which I felt like that was kind of going to be what to expect, honestly.
Yeah,
I didn't think that they were going to actually end up giving us any kind of Legion upgrade kit right now. I feel like that's kind of the flavor of like you as a collector over time. You're able to kind of gather these little neat bits that you haven't used and kind of save them to make these veterans. Um, I think I say that in particular because in first edition, when like Betrayal of Calc came out, the Mark IV tactical Marines, you know, you could make them as veterans just by giving them a melta gun and a
yeah,
plasma gun. Those could, you know, work as their specialist weapons, which made it really as an easy Pride of the Legion intro kit for a lot of people who didn't want to just run, you know, 20-man tactical squads.
yeah. But the
Um,
difference is that when our Mark of Calth came out, that was it. They had no other Heresy plastic. That was the first.
Sure.
Like we have the upgrade sets now. So I was like, because in the last box we got, they threw in, the plasma gun upgrades and they threw in like different upgrades there, which I guess we have the disintegrator upgrades as well, but it would have been cool to be like, here's a set of 10 extra heads that are veteran heads or something. But
Yeah.
uh,
One more thing before we get out of the release kit, I have to just once again mention the Saturnine. I've been so excited for this one, and we kind of mentioned about it on our last show. But I'm really thrilled with what they did, and like I really like their reintroduction to the setting in a way
yeah,
of how Games Workshop took a minute and said this is an old thing, but it's coming again and new, and it's really cool because this was a little mentioned thing in the lore, but I was talking about it to the Hammers and Dice guys. And Deeds Endure, it's talked about how Vulcan has recently started re-implementing these kits. I have the image that I'll show here in just a second when we get there. But so it sounds like from Games Workshop in this review or reveal, I guess I should say, um, the Saturnine have become recently reinvigorated by Vulcan rediscovering how to make it and making it widely known throughout all the legions. A very cool callback of why it's back, why it's coming back. But not only that, so I think it builds on the current lore. There's this one short story, it's about 10 pages called like Deeds Endure. And it's in the Shattered Legion Horus Heresy anthology book. And in there, it talks about how these 20 salamanders are transporting basically ancient armor marks of Saturnine Terminator armor, and it's the specialized one that Vulcan has made himself, and it's shared by I can't remember where it was, but it was confirmed at one point in time that this is not technically Saturnine armor since it's the one that Vulcan improved upon because you can see that there is this upgraded gun on the top. So once again, it was kind of seen as proto Centurion armor even at that time,
yeah.
um, and that's why I kind of like to think about these guys as potentially filling that niche in a lot of armies. But I thought that was a really cool callback to like one short story, 10 pages long, and it's one of the best salamander representations in the Horus Heresy because they get so little love. Like you actually see a blown Praetor who's kind of having to throw his weight around of 20 salamanders versus like 200 iron hands, and this Praetor for the salamanders is basically telling him like why you're going to listen to me. And it's because he has these and he drops down and wipes out so many guys using this. And like a few of them end up getting killed in the assault, but it inspires the Iron Hands to kind of reinvigorate
Yeah.
themselves and rededicate themselves. I
And
really recommend it
actually,
for anyone who is able to read it. So I'm hoping actually we get these models for the salamanders.
so one of the things that they dropped is some really cool paint jobs of Saturnine in different color schemes.
Yeah.
One of them being the Iron Hands. One of them, interestingly enough, being the White Scars. I don't know that it's necessarily the most thematic for the White Scars, but it does look very cool.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, potentially, once again, if they're deep strike assault, then I think that they could fill an interesting niche for the White Scars
yeah,
because second edition really had hit this weird stride of not having as much deep strike available to Terminators, where it was fairly available in first edition by taking the deep strike Rite of War.
yeah.
I'm excited to potentially see this back in a big way. I really enjoyed seeing the Saturnine Praetor as well. The one for the painted in the salamander colors. I will say his head looks very interesting, and that it even has almost flame icons on it. I was
Yeah,
really
it does.
surprised
Like
by
it
that.
definitely, I mean, it was the same thing with the first box where it's like technically these are Legion agnostic models, but they feel like the Legion they're painted as a little bit. Like for there's the
Sure,
first box, the Praetor with the axe, he felt very Sons of Horus. And you can still paint him
but
other ways and modify
I
them and
mean,
whatever.
he could just
But
as easily fit into a Night Lords. Like he could just
yeah.
fit into, he could fit in the gambit of Trader Host, and then you could put a different head on him and potentially make him feel a little bit more loyalist akin. But like that flame head is directly kind of only Salamander visible,
Yeah.
which I find is just kind of an interesting thing to kind of throw in here.
I mean, I wonder if they
Um,
have multiple head options. I mean, a lot of
yeah.
because the Saturnine don't seem to have any helmetless heads. I wonder if they'll come with multiple helmeted head options. So maybe it'll
Well,
be
that's a
like
good point. I
one
didn't see
option with
that.
the flames, one option without the flames.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
because it
we'll
doesn't
see.
make sense to be in these things without your helmet. But I guess it never makes sense to be without a helmet in Warhammer in general.
Yeah, I mean, because
Uh,
Terminators have come without helmets, so
yeah. I will
um,
say this is going to be the first thing that I paint up, though. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the image. I'm
yeah,
hoping that we can throw it up when we post this. But like, the new Praetor and Saturnine armor is
yeah,
incredible, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. And it seems like it might be kind of almost low tier Primarch, able to take on. It's just
yeah,
an interesting idea.
yeah. We'll definitely see it. And I love like the cracks on the hammer. I don't know if those are painted
Yeah,
on, and it looks like those might actually be in the model, which
yeah.
is pretty
I
cool.
can't wait
It's
to
showing
paint
like
that
the
obsidian
weathering.
model. I've been looking out to try to do. I made my own special kind of character long ago in first edition. This like little known mentioned salamander who I was really hyped for, but I've been looking to make a Terminator variant of him for this new edition.
There
And
you
I
go.
made him a long time ago where he had kind of a similar hammer. I'm trying to get it right there, but I wanted to kind of capture that aesthetic, and I'm really excited to maybe see this and try that. And
Yeah,
kit bash a new version of him to be ready for this new release.
yeah. So let's move on because we still have a lot of stuff to cover.
Yes, sorry.
Uh, so the next thing is, I mean, well, and this is, I guess, a nice transition point. Obviously, in the box, you're getting the dice, you're getting the markers, we're getting the new rule book, which is confirmed to be a new rule book. You have to get a new rule book, as well as they're redoing all of the library books. So I know there are a lot of people who aren't thrilled about that. I, for one, I don't mind it because, and again, this is going to go into rules change territory, which we can get into a little bit down the line. But for them to address some of the issues that I was most concerned about meant they were going to have to either heavily FAQ the books or redo them, right? So I'm not super upset that they're redoing them because how much of a pain in the butt would it be to be going through like a 20-page FAQ and
Yeah,
have to print that out and bring it along with you for your book every time you're at a
yeah.
game? So for
And it just gets confusing and way
yeah,
too many books and
for
extra stuff. And like we're already kind of at that right now with
yeah,
2.0
yeah.
in some cases, and it just happens.
So for the sake of simplicity and hopefully they've heard the feedback and have made it easier to find rules between the main rule book and the library books, because that was a big issue as well, being like, where the hell is this rule? Is it in the main rule book? Is it in the library book?
Right.
I can't find it. And you literally spend 10 minutes, you and your opponent, searching through like three different books, trying to find one little rule to figure out what is going on in this interaction. So I'm hoping that
Um,
they've simplified that with these new books as well.
I think this is new. Like I want to get to my kind of most excited point. It seems like we're getting new stats in a lot of ways as well. We can talk about this more later, and I'd like to read more about what is being announced about it. But just my initial kind of reactions from it, I think in the same way that reactions were a big addition to 2.0, I think these new points in the stat could be a really interesting thing. If like some legions are talked about as being able to resist Psychana powers a lot more, and some might be more susceptible. So the idea that maybe their willpower is higher, and I guarantee you, salamanders might be the first one that are shown, and in that way, they are known to be kind of have a higher resistance to psychic powers in some instances. I think
Yeah.
it might just create a
And we can
new
talk about that
dynamic
now
in
because
the
we're talking,
balance.
we're talking about the rule stuff and now. I may as well get into it.
Right.
Yeah, so there's four instead of just having one leadership, now there's basically four leadership characteristics, which is leadership, willpower, intelligence, and cool, which I find to be a very interesting name. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
But I get
essentially,
what they're saying with it, though.
yeah, each one of these is for something different. Because there's four different, instead of just having like pinned, there's like pinned, suppressed, stunned, routed. So like it's potentially increasing the complexity of what's happening on the table, which who knows? I mean, I don't want to speculate onto whether it's a good or a bad thing until we actually have the full rule set because it's so easy to take this one little rule and be like, this is gonna make everything more complicated. I
It's
don't
going to
know.
change
Vanilla.
everything. But like
It's gonna,
once again, I
because
think if you think about it, that like the idea that like I think this could really help night fighting. Like so,
yeah,
everyone claims that like night fighting is just -1 leadership. Well, I think now they can kind of take that along and see. where that actually, where it actually hits people. And it's just a little bit maybe more nuanced. I do wish that they had talked more about how vehicles might be changing. And especially because they were definitely hyping us for the idea that the Fellblade is coming. And I think that's been one of the community's biggest issues with 2.0 has been how do we interact with vehicles in a better way.
Yeah. I mean, also just like in terms of, for instance, the Thousand Suns, you're talking about psychers, because it even mentions in here that psychers will have higher willpower. Like that could be one of the things that might save the Thousand Suns,
Absolutely.
where, just Thousand Suns, instead of just like, oh, well, they all have leadership 10, maybe they all have willpower 10 or
Mm-hmm.
willpower 9, and it makes it so that they're not as likely to kill themselves every time that they do one of their minor arcana. Assuming that those stay the same. I don't know. Like we have no
Right.
idea what what will be addressed or not, but uh just on the face of it, that would make a lot of sense. Where it's like, yeah, this way you can make them better at psychic powers without generically just making them better at everything. You'd be like, no, specifically, this is a good thing that they're very good at. And then the weapons, because it's on the same page here, like the weapon profiles have changed. This seems to be more similar to the current 40K rules, which honestly, I have no idea how the current 40K rules work because I haven't played 40K in 20 years. So this is something I'm gonna have to learn, but it seems now weapons have damage characteristics
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just having strength and AP. So there's some things here that haven't been fully explained in the article.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just say what I think they are because I have honestly have no idea.
So
But
I'm going to take a stab here at it, and I actually think it's going to work out really well for all of us, because now I think there is some nuance here. And so, like Randy, when we were talking about the addition update and the idea of maybe making a Thunderhammer brutal 2 but strength 7, so it doesn't double people out. Well, maybe then it's only -2 initiative instead of going at initiative 1, which is your power fist. I think this gives us a lot more variety in how what weapon you take really matters for your character of where you're attacking. Obviously, I am looking at like the Saturnine Disruption Fist right now. I really enjoy that attacks for the attacks for or, it's just saying like look at your character, or is it a chain fist, a double chain fist that give you +1 attack or something like that. I think it's going to really streamline potentially some rules. Um, and then AP seems to be the same, where it's not going 40K, where it is degrading armor of like, okay, so like your AP Fist 2 is -2. So then now you have like a 3 up armor, say, whatever that is. In that instance, I kind of botched that, but I'm saying that like it seems to be consistent with first and second edition of AP2, meaning that it goes through armor 2 plus and better.
yeah,
So I think that's at least what I'm happy about first, um, because that definitely changes the dynamics of the rules if that changed.
and it does
Um,
say in one of the articles, and again, I'm always a little skeptical with where these articles are written because I don't think the Warhammer community people are always fully up to speed or understand how these rules work. I feel like sometimes they're given something and they kind of translate it the best they can without necessarily knowing the
right.
reality. So that's another thing too. It's where it's like we have to take a little bit of grain of salt with whatever we're seeing here because it might not be 100% accurate. But one of the things they mentioned in one of these articles is that the rules are not a 100% workover. This is not a brand new edition in that like we're throwing the whole old rule set out,
Yeah.
building the game from the ground up. But what they've said is that they're making improvements without totally reworking the core system. Uh,
Which, as long as they keep basically rights of war, I think I'm going to be pretty satisfied because I think that's what makes Heresy really interesting is being able to take that kind of real variety and whatever you want to play. It sounds like they're maybe getting rid of the force org chart and
yeah.
but we kind of said something similar I think last edition when things were changing. So who knows what
Well,
it's
what
actually going
seems
to be.
interesting is it's not like, and again, I don't know 40K, but from what I've talked to with people with 40K is kind of like you can do whatever the hell you want. That's just
Mhm.
how it is now. With this, it seems like they're potentially getting rid of the force org chart, and you can reorganize your force in certain ways, but you'll get bonuses by organizing it
Right.
in
So
the right kind of way. So you're
What might
encouraged
also
to do it certain ways.
it might also be kind of more like seventh edition, where at the tail end of it, people were getting special organization charts where if you could take an army that was a crusade, single HQ2 troops, and then you could take on basically an auxiliary detachment that ran under certain ways, and if you built them, your troops would get extra rules.
Yeah.
So that might be how we see rights of war in the way that, um, you know, if you play along to a specific like Legion specific build chart of how the initial force is comprised, and then you can take on these auxiliary detachments. Um, who knows? It's
Yeah.
really just a lot going on right now, and I wish we had more, but we obviously need to be patient.
Yeah.
Um,
It seems like excuse me. It seems like they've also updated challenges. They're calling them challenge gambits now,
yeah,
or at least aspects of challenges. So hopefully this addresses, you know, one of my biggest issues with challenges is how that they're a lot of times used as a way to circumvent the way the rules are meant to be played, as opposed to being what they're supposed to be, which is like a themey battle between two big
yeah,
characters. So
and
hopefully,
something to feel like is a cool moment.
yeah, like hopefully that this brings it back to that, as opposed to being like, I'm just gonna challenge out your praetor so you can't wipe out the rest of my squad. So,
Right.
hopefully this does address that. Uh, and then going back to the new library books, so it looks like we're at launch, we're gonna get the two Space Marine books, the Hereticus and the Astartes. We're gonna get the Auxilia. Interestingly, if this split the Questores from the Mechanicums, that's two separate books.
Which I'm kind of upset about that one, honestly.
Yeah.
I think that one could have been together. I know the Questors play differently, and if like okay, I'll eat those words though. If they come out with this new edition and they give Questors house modifiers, like they kind of almost give the Legion trait rule, but it's kind of what night house you take. If they give more to the knights, cool.
I
I'm
mean, I would
okay with
hope
it.
they do because we've
Mhm.
mentioned several times before, Knights desperately need some loving. So maybe the
Yep.
fact that they're dedicating their own book would suggest that they've put more effort into making them a usable force.
Yes.
Uh,
I've already seen some people scared of also right now. Where are the demons? Where are the militia? Obviously, they told us the Talons of the Emperor are going to get a PDF. I want to talk about them first. So I think
yeah.
we're not seeing them yet, or they're not getting their immediate release because the Sisters of Silence are going to get a big refresh, quote unquote, refresh in the way that they're just going to get an army to begin with. They took the time to print, to print last edition, give rules for all of these models, and never any. It was one of the really standout parts of second edition. Now that we're kind of wrapping it up, where these did not get models.
Yeah.
Almost everything else that was printed in these black books for second edition, they got models. I think the one notable one that I can think about is the Artilax in the Mechanica, but it got a Legion Imperialis one, so I'm guaranteeing you it's coming.
Yeah. Also, Lord
But
Ascended didn't never got a model.
sure,
Or
I
like
guess
yeah,
I've
like
always
there's
seen
certain
like
things like
Lorgar Ascended is like just paint them differently.
yeah, or like the
Um,
con on a bike. Um,
sure, absolutely. The con on the bike, he needs one. Don't get me wrong, that absolutely needs to happen. Um, but I guess I say that in the way that those are named characters, and
yeah,
like
no,
those
I
are just
understand what you're
specific
saying.
variants.
I do think
Um,
that they had intentions of things that they were going to do with second edition.
oh hell yeah.
They just never did. And for
Uh-huh.
whatever reason, it could be the what happened with the issues with the launch of Legions Imperialis. It could be with the way the launch of the Old World went. One of the
Yep.
things that I've heard consistently is that they their biggest issue is with production, is with being able to keep up with the demand of production,
It
both with
sounds like they
resin
might be
and
able to.
plastic.
Yeah,
And
it
I'm
sounds like
sure,
they've been able to resolve that with building a new facility.
yeah,
Okay, so but I'm calling it sisters. They're getting their full range, I would say, because
yeah.
they're really the thing that's missing right now from the Custodes. If you had to ask like what are the Custodes missing, I don't think that they're missing a spear that they showed
Well, you
off.
say that, funnily enough, one of the things that they showed off as coming is an
Yeah,
Armite
but the
sphere.
spear. Yeah,
So clearly
cool.
they are going to do some sort of Custodes refresh. hopefully
And
it's
I'm sure
Cody's
that it's coming.
ancestors, but
Yeah, but like the idea that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the Paragon glaive. It's like the basically special sphere, right?
honestly, I mean, it
Or
looks like
Paragon sphere, whatever it is.
it looks like a slightly updated Guardian Spear to me.
I think so, but I think it looks sleeker and definitely the blade design looks more finessed. Like I said, I feel like it looks kind of like the Apollonian spear that Valdor has. So I would go with the idea that it's maybe a Paragon spear, was my initial thought. Which maybe suggests a
I mean,
character.
it
What
could
if they gave
be.
us a character Captain Terminator
Yeah.
armor
It's
one,
it's
so
definitely
that
it's
you could
definitely
take it a
possible.
different way?
Yeah.
Um, but I would say like if that was the case, they would have shown us this model and they would say, hey, by the way, this is going to be released on day one as well. And here's your Custodes model. Be grateful. I think if they were really going to, delay this thing, it's because Sisters of Silence kind of need a little bit more. And like literally, if they came out with 2 or 3 more kits for them, um, I think they'd be there. I think they totally would be there as a full army and then just give them the plastic vehicle.
Yeah. Uh,
Yep.
yeah, moving on to other new plastic that's coming out. So it looks like they're redoing the tarantula. So the tarantula is gonna have looks like 4 different weapon options, which
Mm-hmm.
again, like it just comes down to what the new rules are because the PDF rules that we have right now, this thing is practically unusable. It is, I think, BS2,
Yeah,
if
I
I'm
think
not
it's the problem.
mistaken.
But like, if it's so cheap and it potentially fills a niche of like of a distraction, or taking the drop fire, the intercept assault fire, I think there's a world in there that this can become usable.
Yeah, we just have to see what the rules are. Hopefully they've been updated.
Yeah.
Because yeah, right now, I don't know. Yeah, if you're doing a deep strike list, but also with intercepts, would you really bother intercepting one of these things if you could intercept a
No, probably
character
not.
instead?
But
So
we're getting a lot of rules updates. So like,
yeah,
and
so
they seem to be
that's
pushing
that's
it.
what
So
we'll have to see is how
yes.
they've changed intercept and deep strike and all that. What I'm
Mm-hmm.
much more excited about though is plastic rapiers. These
Well,
boys.
let me go back to the tarantulas and the arachnids for 1 second. Well, I
Okay.
mentioned it kind of a little bit earlier. It might be a thing where it's a special add-on to your list. So like you have a currency almost in the meta game that you get to spend beforehand of like, what if I get to spend 1 command point and get 2 tarantulas? And or I can spend 1 command point to try to seize the initiative. That's for you, Randy. Like the idea that you can't just, automatically get to do it. There is kind of a metagame currency that these things become viable in beforehand. That is really projecting. That could be really out there, but it seems like they're kind of like I saw one small thing in the rules for the campaign where they were talking about spend 1 command point. It was when they were showing the Isfahan journal. Um, I saw something like that in there, and it got my kind of head spinning in that direction.
Yeah. I mean that is possible, but that would be typically, and again, this who knows, but what they've done with the campaign book so far is the rules for the campaigns are really specific to being in a campaign. So
Absolutely,
and that might be something that like is part of the Istvan campaign that wouldn't necessarily be part of just a generic game that you're playing on with your friend.
sure. But
Um,
I do think that the idea that with the Arachnis coming in the box set, it's kind of like in the idea that last edition, everyone wanted a Spartan and they gave us one in the box. And now, actually, like in second edition, Spartans weren't that actually that great. But it was like everyone has one because it came in the real box. And
yeah,
Arachnus coming in the third edition box really signals to me that idea that maybe fortifications might become more of a thing. I think that'd be awesome. I really think that that could be a cool addition to the game again.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
it comes down to the rules, but it's like you just said,
yep,
just because it's in the box doesn't mean everyone's going to want to use it. If
totally.
the
But it
rules
will.
are
I do
not,
think that if everyone has it, and it's kind of this once again, it's not actually going into your 3,000 point list. You get an extra kind of currency outside of the game, and now it
yeah,
becomes viable and becomes a new tactical element to play along with.
yeah. I mean, we'll
Yep.
see. I'm very curious, and again, this is all
All
speculation.
speculation.
We have no idea about any of this stuff other than what's, was said or what was written in these articles,
Yeah.
which is
Comment
which
below
is
on why
not
we're
much.
wrong and how when you come back here after the release of all the rules, tell us why we were wrong and foolish to begin with. But continuing on from there, we got the quad mortars and the just rapier batteries in general. In
Yeah, which
general,
is going to be, it
um,
looks like it's going to be two different kits, one for the
well,
grav and the bolter, and one for the quad launcher and the laser destroyer.
I think the crew is all the same, if I'm right. They're just using different options from both of them, but
Yeah,
it just I think will change
I
out
think
the weapon
they're
sprue.
just painting them differently, and it looks like they're in a slightly different order. But it's the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, the crew is the same. Uh, I think that they. I mean, I'm excited because A, the plastic rapers is great, but also the plastic or like the resin crew for the rapers are look real goofy now with how tiny they are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean both of my real armies right now are still first edition standard. So like every time they change the scale, I'm like, oh my God.
You're gonna
So
have to
it's
like
gonna.
completely redo your salamanders for this edition.
I've
Just
actually been
ground
having a
up.
real question about that. Do the Mark twos become a part of it? I don't think so right now. The Saturnine
The
definitely are though.
Saturnine are gonna be so
They're
big.
gonna be so
They're
big,
gonna
and I
be
cannot wait to use these chunky boys. Um,
And then
okay,
also moving on from that, the Mark II assault marines. I was not expecting this at all. Uh these guys look sick.
yeah, they did look sick. I'm excited for them. Like I can't say wow, I'm amazed and congrats GW. Like we had Mark Six Assault Marines already. Like they don't
Yeah.
really feel an additional kind of niche that I feel like is really filled. But like I will say they look great, and I think the aesthetic for the Mark Two worked really well with the Mark Three as well. So if you wanted to get a kit of this and Mark Three and potentially making a Mark Three jump pack kit, from what I understand, the Mark III use the exact same kind of jump pack. So, I think it just gives people variety in how they can
Yeah.
build their Legion. Always love
Yeah, I mean, because the thing I
that.
like, and we'll see, my guess is they're probably going to continue it with the Mark IIs because that just seems to be what they're doing now. But as much as I love the Mark Six and Mark III sculpts, uh, they're very limiting in terms of the customization, and like you have to work really hard to make them feel different from each other. And
Oh,
so if
absolutely.
you're running like a list with a lot of assault marines, I really like the idea that like you can mix it up now, not just by having to do a whole bunch of different conversions, but now you can throw in a Mark II squad. So it's not like you're not just seeing the same Mark Six models over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Uh,
I definitely agree, and that's what I've actually kind of found. And when you look at the lore, and especially like, or at least for the salamanders, you can definitely see that there are squads that have mixed armor. And I think that the ability to have different mark armors, pose them differently through your customization, and then mixing them throughout different squads really gives a lot of variety and life to your
yeah,
units.
I mean, especially if you're doing a themey loyalist legion that just has had the shit kicked out of them so many times, and they're just you know
Bulk in, let's go.
using the scraps that they can salvage. They're,
Yep.
they're not all going to be the same stuff. They're going to be pulling whatever they can from dead bodies and slapping it on.
Um, the breachers look really cool. I'm kind
Yeah.
of under the idea that maybe now I might get like 20 breachers and do some night lords with those.
I hope, I
Could
mean,
be
it'll be
interesting.
interesting to see with the way the new damage rules work. This might be a way around, like, because one of the things we've talked about, not necessarily on the show, but I mean, we've had a lot of discussions in our local community about how the breachers have these massive shields. How is it that bolters damage them the same way they damage tactical marines?
Or
That
las guns. Like
be,
you could just say the exact same
or
thing.
whatever.
Like
But yeah, I mean, so hopefully with the new damage rules, this is one of those things that they could address where it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily giving you a crazy invuln save, but most small arms fire is going to have a much harder time wounding you because of this
yeah,
massive shield that you're carrying.
yeah. I think a much needed thing of like just give breachers a little something extra, make them like fun to kind of use again. Because I think right now I've actually kind of like I've had 20 breachers ready to paint with my salamanders, but I've just never kind of felt the need to
Yeah.
get them done.
I mean, I built
Um,
a breacher squad for my Thousand Sons, and I played a couple games with them, and I was like, nope, these guys are too
well,
expensive.
Randy, that's just because there was Thousand Suns. The new day is dawning for you potentially.
We'll see. We will
Yep.
see. And then there's this. So, what do you think this other Mr. Clearly, it's like a Mechanicum type
The
thing.
pistol. Oh wait, so the one
Yeah.
thing above it though is the pistol. I'm
Oh,
calling a Moritat for that. That's just kind of my quick assumption.
I mean, that just looks
Um,
like that's like a Volkite. what's the like not a charger, but like the Volkite Cal or what?
Serpenta.
Serpent, yeah, Volkite Serpenta, yeah.
That's what it looks like, and it has a scope on it. I would assume it's somebody who's kind of a good marksman from that. You could maybe argue a siege breaker or something similar. I feel like we've already gotten that though. I feel like a Mortat is more likely, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you look
Um,
at the arm Van Brace is fancier, so it's
mhm,
definitely gonna be some sort of Centurion type character.
yep. And then the Mechanicus guy, no clue. Maybe Scutari themed in there, something a little coded for them, but who really
Yeah, I
knows
mean,
right
it
now?
looks like something that's like a stealthy scout type thing with the cloak
Mhm.
and the long gun.
His mechanics on the arm, where you see it kind of curve in the hilt, remind me a lot of like a galvanic rifle, and some of the other ones that come in the Skitarii Ranger and Vanguard kit. So that's kind of why I'm basing it on that one. And they kind of remind me of like that stilt one that they have now.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk to you about my gripes though. GW, if you're listening, where are my salamander praetors? I'm gonna bitch about this until the day I die now. Legions have been getting their special moments in the sun forever, and I've been patiently waiting. And now it's my time in the sun for the salamanders. We need our praetors. Please don't screw us out of these.
Yeah, how could you do the Raven Guard before the Salamanders? Come on. Oof.
I know, like you got to like I was talking with I messaged the guys earlier. I was like, let's talk about the journal Isfon really quick. So like first off, I hope that salamanders just get characters in general in the new Liber Astartes, but if they are going back to Isfon, I was going to ask the question of like what's a cool character that could be added from that campaign that still has a presence in the larger 40K. So like Nakona Shuriken came to mind for the Raven Guard, and then I mentioned to the comments like Artilius Numion was probably the biggest salamander that ended up escaping, who could, in theory, have rules. It feels weird giving characters rules that die like midway or early on in the
You say
Crusade
that,
or in
but
Heresy.
all Tarvets and
I
uh,
know, and that's why like I'm having to
he
break myself
dies in
of
the
that
first
habit.
battle of the heresy, you know.
Yep.
There's definitely characters, like I said, particularly the loyalists from the Traitor Legions. Most of them do not live very long into the heresy.
Yeah, like
Very
your
not.
Gargiel Loken, like he should definitely be more of a Knight Errant kind of character than his Luna Wolf
Yeah.
version.
And hopefully he gets a rules update. He needs better rules. Like for
Oh
how
yeah, he needs a
best
new
he is in the
model as well.
lore, his rules are garbage.
If they really wanted to impress us, they should do an Abaddon versus Loken refresh because we need a new Abaddon for the Sons of Horus and we need a new Loken model in general
Ugh, don't tease
and
me.
do a Knights Errant version.
Don't tease me with that.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that is also teased as well before we get into the Fellblade, because I want to talk about the Fellblade and what that means. On the Liber Auxilia book, we see that there is an Ogren. That probably means that we're going to get the plastic Ogrens for the Auxilia. I think a very missed unit at the moment. So just wanted to flag that. That's exciting. I saw on Facebook that somebody put up that there's a new Whirlwind kit potentially. It's seen in one of the pages as they're like flipping through. It's one of like the background art. It looks like it has like clusters of 3 missiles or something like that. Okay,
Yeah,
but yes, the
it
Fellblade.
sounds like pretty much. One of the things that they mentioned in the articles is that they're going to be trying to speed up the transition from resin to plastic for a lot of heresy units. So
Hopefully.
I would imagine a lot of tanks are going to be getting that love. I think the one thing that I'm guessing is probably not going to change anytime soon, which is unfortunate, but would not surprise me, is I think a lot of the Legion specific units are going to stay resin for a while. That will probably be the last thing to really transition because I would love to get some like resized Legion specific units. Uh, because a lot of them are just they look so cool and they're so essential if you're trying to create a theming list. But when size wise, when you compare them to the new Mark 6 and Mark
Mm-hmm.
3 and now Mark 2, they look so puny, you know.
Yep. And I don't want to be too harsh on GW, but like honestly, I think the rescale of the Tactical Marines was a terrible idea just from second edition on. And I say that because like we had gotten to kind of the end of the heresy range of like everyone had their special characters and their special models, which obviously all of them have not been updated, and now they're out of scale. Um, and it requires that refresh, which is just so long in coming. When we had just had the really successful Betrayal of Cal and the Burning of Prospero, but then to go on to Age of Darkness 2.0 and then give us the same Cataphracti, which, if I kind of really in hindsight, they probably need a refresh and a scale up
Yeah.
now. And I think the idea that just changing and making the Mark 6, and then the Mark 3, and now the Mark 2 upscaled, I think has been kind of, I don't know. It's not been my favorite thing, and I was kind of mentioning it earlier. Like I still have not integrated them into any of my older legions, and it's because it's a very noticeable difference.
I mean,
Um,
I don't mind
but
it.
yeah,
I can understand the frustration from a 1.0 perspective of having these full legions and being like, well, fuck, this looks goofy as hell next to each other. I totally get that.
sure,
Um, I feel like for me, I was like in a weird middle ground because I started with 2.0 and like had a lot of Mark 4 because that's still my favorite armor style. And like my Ultramarines is a lot of Mark 4 with a little bit of Mark 6 sprinkled in. Uh,
yeah,
I don't necessarily, I mean, the size difference is noticeable, but I don't necessarily mind it. Like, unless the models are like
right
right next
next to
to
each
each other,
other.
you're not really like
Yep.
paying much
But
attention to it.
what you
But
mentioned right there is like you can't get your Legion specific units that aren't scaled properly right now, and they're a lot of the things that you want to run in most instances, and so they do look out of place now, and it
yeah,
just
I mean,
feels
that's the,
weird to
yeah,
me when it happens. That's neither here nor there. I'm really happy with them going into second edition and third edition. We've gotten so much plastic stuff, which has reinvigorated the game, and gotten so many new players. Randy, obviously, you're one of those. Like, really excited for that. And I'm excited to see more of what third edition brings now. Potentially, it might be that additional rules update that brings us into kind of like a fully functional, game.
yeah.
Not to say that it isn't right now, but
Hmm.
it definitely has its kinks. Back to talking about the Fellblade though,
Yeah, Hellblade.
because really excited for that. I hope this means that we're going to get, well, once again, obviously we saw the glaive in the background for the trailer, for the cinematic trailer, so we know that will be coming, and that's going to be a big Horus Heresy, Thursday. Surprise! But we already know it's coming. I think what I'm curious though is to see, will the falchion be readily available quickly, because it's mostly the same chassis. It's just mainly changing out the turret, and a little bit of the front panels. But I hope that kit's coming soon as well.
I mean, yeah, it's so hard to tell. Hmm. I feel like sometimes they're like have a lot of big things come out within a space of a few months, just like rapid fire. And then sometimes it'll be like one thing every 3 or 4 months. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to tell what the release schedule for these may or may not be. But I do think that it's on the pipeline. I think they have a lot of things in the pipeline. The question is just how good they are at actually checking things off the list and just and getting things out. Um,
Right.
because I think the one thing that they're wary of, and this again goes back to their production issues, like, is it's great to release a whole bunch of new kits, but like what happens if they all go out of stock? And then you're like, great, because we've spent so much time this edition just waiting to buy things because they've just been out of stock for months and months and months. So the one of the big things that they need to deal with is figuring out how to keep the production going on these kits so that like for as much as they're releasing new kits, they're keeping them in stock for people.
Yep. And that's, I think, goes back to what we were talking about, the idea that they've hopefully resolved that with apparently a new factory. It's a new big one that's going to be printing out a ton of stuff for them. The shipping should be much better from what I hear from there, in the rumor for that. But yeah, I mean, like, I think that's always just going to be a thing. And especially right now with like how much people are kind of considering how to stock, the idea that they're not on, oh, people aren't just buying them off the shelves anymore. A lot of us are buying them from, online retailers that are giving us a better price. So it's the idea of like how much is demand really, which I think is always going to be trying to, something to keep up with. But the idea is to try to keep up with it a little bit, which Games Workshop feels like, and especially with a lot of the resin models. I've heard that a lot. It's like,
Yeah.
I was watching a video, where they're talking about the Iron Hands. Like, you can't get a single, special unit from the Iron Hands right now on Games Workshop's websites. because they're just all out of print, or not out of print, but just not available.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I've heard is that they were kind of surprised by the success of 2.0, by how big it got. And I think they weren't prepared for, how many people wanted to get into the game and how much stuff was going to be flying off the shelves initially. So hopefully they're coming to this new edition knowing and expecting there to be growth and be able to accommodate for that.
Totally.
But yeah, I think that's probably a good place to leave it off. At this point, there's not much more to say until we actually didn't give an actual release date, right? They just said summer
That's
20.
one of the things that they said they couldn't give today,
Yeah.
was a release date, which I'd assume it's in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I would
Like they
expect two to
said,
three
like that.
months, that
Yeah,
seems to be typical.
I'd probably guess by like July 1st we'll at least be close to the release date.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they normally don't kind of lead us up too much with these. They let us know, and then they're like, "Here it is." We'll
Yeah.
see review copies going out soon.
Yeah. So I'm excited for that. As updates come out, we will, try our best to do more podcasts to talk about them. But yeah, let us know what you guys think, what you thought of the new models, what you think of the potential new rules. And yeah, we'll be back next week with our deep dive into Istavan 5. See you
Looking
guys
forward to it. Thank
then.
you guys.